So, Genesis 10. The Table of Nations. This is the account of Shem, Ham, and Japheth, Noah's sons, who themselves had sons after the flood. This is just one of those many passages in the Bible that's a history of who begot who, and a chronology and a genealogy of tribes. Is it absolutely correct? I mean, did they write anybody out of this that they didn't like? Who knows? Really? Who knows? The sons of Japheth, Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshech, and Tiras. The sons of Gomer, Ashkenaz, Riphath, and Togarmah. The sons of Javan, Elisha, Tarshish, the Kittites, and the Rodanites. From these maritime peoples spread out into their territories by their clans within their nations, each with its own language. The Hamites, the sons of Ham, Cush, Egypt, Put, and Canaan. The sons of Cush, Seba, Havilah, Sabta, Raamah, and Sabteka. The sons of Raamah, Sheba, and Dedan. So are these people, or are they nations? Are they individuals or groups? It's, again, not clear. Maybe both. I mean, maybe the king gave the name to the tribe, and that was what everybody said were the important people. But the Bible over time teaches us, especially through the books of Kings, that the kings were not always the people who God was favoring, and that people who make themselves important aren't always the people who really matter to God. And that becomes more prevalent in the New Testament. It's one of those things about the Bible where they say, oh, it's written that blah, blah, blah. Well, it's written, but is that really what it means? It's written that these kings went to war with each other and so on and so forth. But does it always mean that they were somehow doing God's will? Or were they doing their own? And is that the contrast? I mean, that's the thing we have to figure out. What's the difference? Cush was the father of Nimrod, who became a mighty warrior on the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. That is why it is said, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord. The first sinners of his kingdom were Babylon, Uruk, Akkad, and Calneh in Shinar. From that land he went to Assyria, where he built Nineveh, Rehoboth, Kela, and Resen, which is between Nineveh and Kela, which is the great city. Egypt was the father of the Ludites, Anamites, Leobots, Naphtuhites, Pathrusites, Casluhites, from whom the Philistines came, and Caphtorites. Canaan was the father of Sidon, his firstborn, and of the Hittites, Jebusites, Amorites, Girgashites, Hivites, Archites, Sinites, Arvadites, Zimrites, and Hamathites. Hamathites, yeah. Later, the Canaanite clans scattered, and the borders of Canaan reached from Sidon toward Gerar as far as Gaza, and then toward Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, and Zeboim as far as Lasha. These are the sons of Ham by their clans and languages in their territories and nations. The Semites' sons were also born to Shem, whose older brother was Japheth. Shem was the ancestor of all the sons of Eber. The sons of Shem: Elam, Asher, Arphaxad, Lud, and Aram. The sons of Aram: Uz, Hul, Gether, and Meshech. Arphaxad was the father of Shelah, and Shelah the father of Eber. 2 sons were born to Eber. One was named Peleg, because in his time the earth was divided. His brother was named Joktan. Does that mean an earthquake? Joktan was the father of Almadad, Shalef, Hazarmaveth, Jerah, Hadaram, Uzal, Dikla, Obal, Abimael, Sheba, Ophir, Havilah, and Jobab. All these were sons of Joktan. The region where they lived stretched from Mesha toward Safar in the eastern hill country. These are the sons of Shem by their clans and languages in their territories and nations. These are the clans of Noah's sons according to their lines of descent within their nations. From these nations spread out over the earth after the flood. More of it. Tower of Babel, 11. Now the whole world had one language and a common speech. As people moved eastward, they found a plain in Shinar and settled there. They said to each other, "Come, let's make bricks and bake them thoroughly." Oops. So, let's see. They used brick instead of stone and tar for mortar. Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches into the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves. Otherwise we'll be scattered over the face of the whole earth." But the Lord came down to see the city and the tower the people were building. The Lord said, "If as one people speaking the same language they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language, so they will not understand each other." So the Lord scattered them from there all over the earth, and they stopped building the city. That is why it is called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of the whole world. From there the Lord scattered them over the face of the whole earth. It's interesting. It seems to be a common theme. I wondered, in Roman times, had they conquered Persia, this is after Christ, had they managed to conquer Persia and India, they would have gained advanced mathematics complementing what they already had. And from there, they had steel. They even had a device, a toy that propelled itself on an axle by using steam. Rail is not far off from that, some smart person figuring it out. And from that period of time in humanity's history to the time that we had nuclear weapons was only about 200 years, really. And if Rome had developed nuclear weapons, I don't think we'd be here. I don't think anybody would be here. I think they would have destroyed the world. But, again, God sort of saves us from ourselves, pausing here. That's not to say that science is bad or learning is bad. We should learn, we should explore, we should develop as a species, but not just science. And that's what the message from Babylon through Christ and the kinds of things that could have happened had the martyrs not reformed the empire. The lesson is that we couldn't handle it. We couldn't handle science. We weren't ready because we didn't understand how to be nice to each other. And if we didn't understand that, we would destroy everything. Everything, not just us. And that's, it sounds so easy, right? Just be nice to each other, love one another. How easy would that be? But somehow that's not the way things go for us. And so we need this guiding hand to let us figure it out before we get there. And, again, the sort of, are there aliens involved in this whole thing? That doesn't mean there's not God. But, we wouldn't want to be a threat to our neighbors. And certainly they would have a considerable interest in keeping us from being that threatening, and so would God, because God wants peace in the universe, I guess. Wouldn't it be easy, you know? We have something very special. We don't really know what it is. That's the message of this whole thing. We don't know what it is. It's more powerful than any of our science or anything, but we're not ready for it quite, because something in our nature is a little screwy. So we're trying to learn a lesson over generations and generations and generations before we can achieve whatever it is that God wants for us. We'll see what that is, More will be revealed. From Shem to Abram, more genealogy. This is the account of Shem's family line. 2 years after the flood, when Shem was 100 years old, he became the father of Arphaxad. And after he became the father of Arphaxad, Shem lived 500 years and had other sons and daughters. When Arphaxad had lived 35 years, he became the father of Shelah. And after he became the father of Shelah, Arphaxad lived 403 years and had other sons and daughters. Shelah, 30 years, father of Eber. Another 403, had other sons and daughters. Eber, 34 years, father of Peleg. Another 430 years, had other sons and daughters. Peleg, 30 years, father of Reu. Another 209 years. Reu, 32 years, father of Serug. Another 207 years. Serug, 30 years, father of Nahor. Another 200 years. Nahor, 29 years, father of Terah. Lived another 119 years. Terah, 70 years, father of Abram, Nahor, and Haran. So, again, maybe these are exaggerations. Maybe they were real. I mean, we have too much of learning from our experience to know what's possible, because it takes a lot of imagination to think that maybe some universal entity living inside the fabric of space-time somewhere could apply the right energies in precise amounts to continue our lives indefinitely. Maybe it's not outside of the realm of scientific reason in terms of quantum physics and cellular biology and so forth. It's possible. It's just we don't seem to be able to figure out how. But we shouldn't think that our ignorance determines the scope of reality. That's the mistake that people make, is that, well, I'm ignorant of how that could be possible, therefore it isn't. Well, that's not the way science is supposed to work. So just consider the possibilities, that's all I'm saying. Abram's family. This is the account of Terah's family line. Terah became the father of Abram, Nahor, and Haran became the father of Lot, while his father Terah was still alive. Haran died in Ur of the Chaldeans in the land of his birth. Abram and Nahor both married. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai, and the name of Nahor's wife was Milcah. She was the daughter of Haran, the father of both Milcah and Iscah. Now Sarai was childless because she was not able to conceive. Terah took his son Abram, his grandson Lot of Haran, and his daughter-in-law Sarai, the wife of his son Abram, and together they set out from Ur of the Chaldeans to go to Canaan. But when they came to Haran, they settled there. Terah lived 205 years, and he died in Haran. The call of Abram, 12. The Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. I'll make you into a great nation, and I'll bless you. I'll make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you I will curse. All the peoples of the earth will be blessed through you." So Abram went as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he set out from Haran. he took his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, all the possessions they had accumulated, and the people they had acquired in Haran, and they set out for the land of Canaan and arrived there. Abram traveled through the land as far as the site of the great tree of Moreh at Shechem. At that time the Canaanites were in the land. The Lord appeared to Abram and said, "To your offspring I will give this land." So he built an altar there to the Lord who had appeared to him. From there he went on toward the hills east of Bethel, and pitched his tent, with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. There he built an altar to the Lord and called on the name of the Lord. Then Abram set out and continued toward the Negev. So a lot of people think, well, Abram's seeing things and hearing voices, doesn't that mean he's crazy? And it comes to that pretty close in the end, one would say. But there's a great book by Kierkegaard under the name Johannes de Silentio called Fear and Loathing. I mean, no, it's not Fear and Loathing. Fear and Trembling. Whoops. Fear and Trembling, about what it means to have faith, and how the author's perspective is really what the character author's perspective, Silentio, is as a what he calls a knight of resignation, which is somebody who's not really able to have faith, not really able to make the leap between what he knows and acting out of what he senses as a command from above, whereas the knight of faith is able to make that leap and to act upon love. So the knight of resignation is just sort of continually backpedaling against the tide of what he could be, but the knight of faith goes forward with what God asks. And so there's neat. So there's this thing that he doesn't understand, but that he explores in the story of Abraham, and his decision here later on. Abram and Egypt. Now there was a famine in the land, and Abram went down to Egypt to live there for a while because the famine was severe. As he was about to enter Egypt, he said to his wife Sarai, "I know what a beautiful woman you are. When the Egyptians see you, they will say, 'This is his wife.' Then they will kill me, but let you live. Say you are my sister, so that I will be treated well for your sake, and my life will be spared because of you." When Abram came to Egypt, the Egyptians saw that Sarai was a very beautiful woman. And when Pharaoh's officials saw her, they praised her to Pharaoh, and she was taken into his palace. He treated Abram well for her sake, and Abram acquired sheep and cattle, and male and female donkeys, male and female servants, and camels. But the Lord inflicted serious diseases on Pharaoh and his household because of Abram's wife Sarai. So Pharaoh summoned Abram. "What have you done to me?" He said, "Why didn't you tell me she was your wife? Why did you say she is my sister, so that I took her to be my wife? Now then, here is your wife. Take her and go." Then Pharaoh gave orders about Abram to his men, and they sent him on his way with his wife and everything he had. So Abram's just like, "Hey, here, Pharaoh, here's my wife, but I'm going to say she's my sister, and you can take her as your own wife?" It's very mercurial, isn't it? Abram and Lot separate. That's one of the things where, people dump the Bible and talk about family values and, marriage is sacred and all this stuff. Well, shoot, this is Abram and Sarai, these are the originators, and they're not exactly faithful here to each other. Abram's just like, okay, whatever, do what you want with her. I guess out of survival instinct, but still, it's like, And God doesn't have any problem with it. God's just like, okay, yeah, keep going. Keep following me. I'll lead you to freedom. Um, the thing that God wants them to protect is their love for one another. But what they do or don't do turns out to be not that important. It's interesting. Go again. Abram and Lot separate. 13. So Abram went up from Egypt to the Negev with his wife and everything he had, and Lot went with him. Abram had become very wealthy in livestock and silver and gold. From the Negev he went from place to place until he came to Bethel, to the place between Bethel and Ai, where his tent had been earlier, and where he had first built an altar. There Abram called on the name of the Lord. Now Lot, who was moving about with Abram, also had flocks and herds and tents, but the land could not support them while they stayed together, for their possessions were so great that they were not able to stay together. And quarreling arose between Abram's herders and Lot's. The Canaanites and the Perizzites were also living in the land at that time. So Abram said to Lot, "Let's not have any quarreling between you and me, or between your herders and mine, for we are close relatives. Is not the whole land before you? Let's part company. If you go to the left, I'll go to the right. If you go to the right, I'll go to the left." Lot looked around and saw that the whole plain of the Jordan towards Zoar was well watered, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt. This was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. So Lot chose for himself the whole plain of the Jordan and set out toward the east. The two men parted company. Abram lived in the land of Canaan, while Lot lived among the cities of the plain and pitched his tents near Sodom. Now the people of Sodom were wicked and were sinning greatly against the Lord. The Lord said to Abram after Lot had parted from him, "Look around from where you are to the north and south, to the east and west. All the land that you see I will give to you and your offspring forever. I will make your offspring like the dust of the earth, so that if anyone could count the dust, then your offspring could be counted. Go walk through the length and breadth of the land, for I am giving it to you." So Abram went to live near the great tree of Mamre at Hebron, where he pitched his tents. There he built an altar to the Lord. Abram rescues Lot. 14. At the time when Amraphel was the king of Shinar, Arioch king of Elasar, Kedorlaomer king of Elam, and Tidal king of Goyim. These kings went to war against Bera king of Sodom, Bersha king of Gomorrah, Shinab king of Admah, Shemember king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, that is Zoar. All these latter kings joined forces in the valley of Steam, that is the Dead Sea Valley. For 12 years they had been subject to Kedorlaomer, but in the 13th year they rebelled. In the 14th year, Kedorlaomer and the kings allied with him went out and defeated the Rephaites in Ashtaroth Karnaim, the Zuzites in Ham, the Emites in Shebekiraithaim, and the Horites in the hill country of Seir, as far as El Paran near the desert. Then they turned back and went to En Mishpat, that is Kadesh, and they conquered the whole territory of the Amalekites, as well as the Amorites who were living in Hazazon Tamar. Then the king of Sodom, the king of Gomorrah, the king of Admah, the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, that is Zoar, marched out and drew up their battle lines in the valley of Siddim against Kedorlaomer, the king of Elam, Tidal king of Goyim, Amraphel, king of Shinar, and Arioch, king of Elasar, 4 kings against 5. Now the valley of Siddim was full of tar pits, and when the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled, some of the men fell into them, and the rest fled to the hills. The 4 kings seized all the goods of Sodom and Gomorrah and all their food, and then they went away. They also carried off Abram's nephew Lot and his possessions, since he was living in Sodom. A man who had escaped came and reported this to Abram the Hebrew. Now Abram was living near the great trees of Mamre the Amorite, a brother of Eshcol and Aner, all of whom were allied with Abram. When Abram heard that his relative had been taken captive, he called out the 318 trained men born in his household and went in pursuit as far as Dan. During the night, Abram divided his men to attack them, and he routed them, pursuing them as far as Hobah, north of Damascus. He recovered all the goods and brought back his relative Lot and his possessions, together with the women and other people. After Abram returned from defeating Chedorlaomer and the kings allied with him, the king of Sodom came out to meet him in the valley of Shaveh, that is, the king's valley. Excuse me. Then Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was priest of God Most High, and he blessed Abram, saying, Blessed be Abram by God Most High, creator of heaven and earth, and praise be to God Most High, who delivered your enemies into his hand. So, Melchizedek comes up as an interesting part of the Bible that recurs again and again. Jesus says at one point, I've become a priest in the order of Melchizedek. There's no record of this guy prior to anything, his tribe, nothing. Like, who is this person? He just comes out of nowhere, is declared a priest of God Most High, and says, this blessing. So there's this idea that if there were one true faith, it would be the order of Melchizedek, which Jesus says he's a priest in the order of Melchizedek. But that church does not really exist. I mean, there are little churches sometimes called Melchizedek, but whatever. There's no way to trace it back. There's no way to get any kind of lineage on anything. And the whole point is that all that is meaningless. And it is, and that's a controversial thing to say, maybe, because a lot of churches hold very tightly to their lineage and order, and like, this determines this, and we came from this, and we were the council of whatever, and that's because that's why we have authority. And the message is that all that is actually inventions of the mind, similar to the Tower of Babel, inventions of the human mind to make us feel like we have power like God, and that God's actual power is so far beyond anything we could conceive that it makes us all look like ants, and we just don't know anything at all, and it's all just a whole bunch of imaginings and posturings of people trying to get an edge over each other, and that all detracts from the message that actual God is trying to give to us, which is that we can be happy if we just treat each other nice, and fairly, in very simple terms. And it's just, so if there is one true church, it's the Church of Melchizedek, but it doesn't exist. It's that elusive thing that we're all trying to get back to, that is somehow kept from us, the Eden which we can never find, the state of grace which is denied to us, which we can only approximate. It's an interesting part of being mortal, and this tells a lot about it. Then Abraham gave him, Melchizedek, a tenth of everything. The king of Sodom said to Abram, Give me the people and keep the goods for yourself. But Abram said to the king of Sodom, with raised hand I have sworn an oath to the Lord, God Most High, creator of heaven and earth, that I will accept nothing belonging to you, not even a thread or strap of a sandal, so that you will never be able to say, I made Abram rich. I will accept nothing but what my men have eaten, and the share that belongs to the men who went with me to Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre. Let them have their share. The Lord's covenant with Abram. 15. After this, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield, your very great reward. But Abram said, Sovereign Lord, what can I give you? What can you give me, since I remain childless, and the one who will inherit my estate is Eliezer of Damascus? And Abram said, You have given me no children, so a servant in my household will be my heir. Then the word of the Lord came to him, This man will not be your heir, but a son who is your own flesh and blood will be your heir. He took him outside and said, Look up at the sky and count the stars, if indeed you can count them. Then he said to him, So shall your offspring be. Abraham believed the Lord, and he credited to him as righteousness. He also said to him, I am the Lord who brought you out of Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land to take possession of it. But Abram said, Sovereign Lord, how can I know that I will gain possession of it? And that's the thing where he's always saying, well, how do I know this is real? How do I know that these things are going to come to pass? That, because if I just believe whatever thoughts come into my head, I'm likely to be disappointed. And that's true for most people. It just happened to not be true for Abram. That he was able to act on faith in the Lord, the one true God, not just an idea in his head, but as something outside of himself that was communicating with him in some weird way. And then, to make that leap to say, well, I don't have the evidence. I don't have proof that this is going to come to pass. I don't have a contract. I don't have, I don't have it in writing. I don't have foresight of the future. It all seems very strange to me that some vision is promising me all these things. If I just do a few simple things that it tells me to do. But then he makes a decision. So the Lord said to him, Bring me a heifer, a goat, and a ram, each 3 years old, along with a dove and a young pigeon. Abram brought all these to him, cut them in two, and arranged the halves opposite each other. The birds, however, he did not cut in half. Then birds of prey came down on the carcasses, but Abram drove them away. As the sun was setting, so Abram's dancing around, fending off the vultures from all these dead animals that he killed, which is kind of crazy. I mean, you'd see this person and think, that person's crazy. What are they doing? After as the sun was setting, Abram fell into a deep sleep, and a thick and dreadful darkness came over him. Then the Lord said to him, Know for certain that for 400 years your descendants will be strangers in a country not their own, and they will be enslaved and mistreated there. But I will punish the nation they serve as slaves, and afterward they will come out with great possessions. You, however, will go to your ancestors in peace and be buried at a good old age. In the 4th generation, your descendants will come back here, for the sin of the Amorites has not yet reached its full measure. When the sun had set and darkness had fallen, a smoking firepot with blazing torch appeared and passed between the pieces. On that day the Lord made a covenant with Abram and said, To your descendants I give this land, from the Wadi of Egypt to the great river, the Euphrates, the land of the Kenites, Kenizzites, Cadmonites, Hittites, Perizzites, Rephaites, Amorites, Canaanites, Girgashites, and Jebusites. To be continued.